Welcome to True Crime and the Unexplained. My name's Clinton and I'm an Australian Private Investigator. Now let's take a trip back to 1994.
It's terrific that we have here, and he says that's it.
Today's true crime story is about the murder of Revelle Balmain. I've been following this case for over 25 years. I want to break this case down like no one has ever done before. I want to unpack the facts and the evidence so you have a better understanding of what really happened to Revelle. Revelle Balmain was born in Sydney on the 11th of July 1972. She grew up in Manly Beach. In 1994 she was living in Bellevue Hill in Sydney's eastern suburbs, where she was pursuing a career in dancing. The year she went missing, she was working for Sydney Showboats. Her second job was modelling, but she really only did this job to pay the rent, as she believed that modelling really wasn't a career or a track that she wanted to go down. Revelle woke up on the 5th of November 1994 with lots to look forward to. She was about to go to Japan to take up another lucrative dance contract. She was due to meet her friend Kate Bracknell that evening, but failed to keep that appointment. Kate last spoke to her by phone at 7:15 p.m. Kate said that she seemed happy, not stressed, and was looking forward to seeing her after she finished work. Later that evening she was meant to meet her boyfriend, but failed to keep this appointment as well. Revelle's boyfriend, the writer Pierce Fisher Pollard, had been concerned for her welfare and phoned friends and relatives hours after she went missing. He conveyed his growing fears about her safety to the police. He said Revelle was excited about visiting her parents, and she was excited about going to Japan. Her modelling career was taking off. He said to police she had everything to live for. Something terrible must have happened to her. Revelle had a secret. Only her best friend Kate knew about it. She had been working as a high-class sex worker. The agency she worked for was called Select Companions. They had booked her a job on the 5th of November with a client named Gavin Seymour. The address that she was going to was McNair Avenue, Kingsford. When Seymour was interviewed 2 days later, he said he'd driven Revelle to the Red Tomato Inn. He said he dropped her there at 7 p.m. To get from Seymour's house to the Red Tomato Inn is only 1.6 kilometres or 1 mile. This should only take about 5 minutes. We have to remember here it is 7:15 p.m. in Sydney. You have light until about 8:30 p.m. at night because of the daylight saving. The following day, Revelle's corked-heeled platform shoes were found in a rubbish bin. Her house keys were found 2 streets away. Her diary, makeup, cane shoulder bag and plastic cradle from a pager lay in the gutter. She went missing after Seymour had dropped her off. It was like she disappeared into thin air. Or did she?
Ravel has been missing for 6 days.
Now here's where the story gets very, very interesting. A coronial inquest in 1999 found that Revelle had died at the hands of a person or persons unknown, and the matter was referred to the Unsolved Homicide Unit for future investigation. This inquest identified Mr. Seymour as the main person of interest. The then Deputy State Coroner, John Abernathy, presided over the inquiry and identified Mr. Gavin Seymour as a suspect but fell short of recommending charges. He told the inquiry, while Mr. Seymour certainly had the opportunity to kill Miss Balmain and rightly in my view is the main person of interest to police, there is no plausible motive proved.
The disappearance of model Revelle Balmain is one of Australia's most intriguing mysteries. A coroner ruled she was murdered and noted suspicions about the last man to see her alive, Seymour.
So let's have a look at suspect number 2, Zoran Stanovic. The inquiry also canvassed suggestions that Miss Balmain might have been murdered by the owner of Select Companions. Abernathy said in the inquiry, he provided contradictory evidence to police and the inquiry about his whereabouts on the day she disappeared, but consistently denied he had anything to do with her disappearance. The inquiry also heard that a wealthy commodities trader and former client of Ravel's, Mark Colton, had told a friend that Miss Balmain had been murdered by the agency for moonlighting or doing extra sex work for cash on the side. She's 10 foot under and no one will ever find her body, he was alleged to have told a friend. He later denied under oath he had ever made that statement. I want to touch on an outlandish theory that the homicide police were looking into in the first month of their investigation. This was that a wealthy Arab prince had kidnapped her and taken her by boat to Saudi Arabia, where then she was sex trafficked. I know this happens a lot in Europe, but here in Australia in 1994, I very much doubt it. This theory didn't hold much credence, and it was later dismissed about 12 months into the investigation. Shortly after the inquest, Superintendent Beresford confirmed that the same two men, Seymour and Zoran, were still the only two suspects in the alleged murder.
For anything, just ring the police. It's as easy as that. I just want them back.
After the 1999 inquest, Seymour left New South Wales for Tasmania. He worked as a cook and lived as a recluse for 15 years. But the case never went away. Five New South Wales detectives flew down to Tasmania to interview Seymour, who was then working as a cook in a hotel in a small town of Cygnet, 55 kilometres away from Hobart. Seymour was interviewed at his rented home and refused to provide police with a DNA sample. As far as I'm aware, police have never got Seymour's DNA. His lawyer has always denied such requests. I'm a bit baffled by this. So I looked into the laws in New South Wales on covert DNA sampling. It says on page 171 that police can take covert samples without people's knowledge, and it can be admissible in court. So my question is this: why haven't the New South Wales detectives done this? Maybe I'm missing something here. In 2008, a new search for forensic evidence has added weight to a police theory that Ravel was murdered at Gavin Seymour's house in Kingsford. Detective Beresford said the cold case unit, using advances in forensic procedures, had gathered new evidence from a Kingsford house where Ravel was last seen. I have to say, when I heard the police forensic unit was searching Gavin Seymour's house again, I got pretty excited. The police have never, ever released that evidence to the media. I guess they're playing their cards close to their chest. But on the other hand, I think they were trying to rattle Seymour's cage. In 2018, he returned to Sydney, pleading guilty to theft charges filed by his own sister. He then moved into a Bondi apartment and was acting as a carer to an elderly disabled woman named Rosa Rosenberg. Then in 2019, he was convicted of assault occasioning actual bodily harm against Rosa. This carries a maximum sentence of 7 years jail. Mr. Seymour was sentenced to a 12-month community correction order and fined $1,500. Basically, he got a slap on the wrist. She made disturbing allegations about Seymour's behaviour. She thought that he was a psychopath. She said that he abused her, and on the day when the police arrived, he had threatened to cut her throat with a knife. Miss Rosenberg later said, the funny thing was he slept with a knife under his pillow. He kept the same knife in his backpack. Police later charged Mr. Seymour with aggravated sexual touching without consent and sexual touching without consent on behalf of Miss Rosenberg. But the charges were later withdrawn on the 9th of December 2020, when it was revealed that Rosa had died of injuries sustained in an explosion inside her apartment. It all seems very sus, very convenient. What do you think? Writer and author John Dale, who wrote the novel Detective Work, flew to Tasmania to research the case and interviewed Gavin Seymour's former employee at the Signet Hotel. Gillian Hunt had told John that Seymour was a loner. He didn't have any friends down here. He never visited anybody. He always took home his alcohol. He was a big drinker. John asked, was he ever violent at work? She replied, he was very odd and there was something off about him. In the kitchen, his knife was always called his stabber. Oh, where's me stabber? He never said, where's me knife? And he always was sharpening his knives. He rented a house off me. One day his dog had been stabbed in the head with a knife. He said to me that the knife fell off the kitchen bench and landed in his dog's head. How does a knife fall off a bench and go through a dog's head, she said. Did he ever discuss with you why he left Sydney? She replied, yes, it cost his parents $70,000, he said. I had the best QC in Sydney, as if he was sort of proud of it. Another time he told me his father used to have all these large trash waste bins. He said they were all through Sydney. And I said, oh, what are the bins for? He said, rubbish, you dumbass. Since then I've always thought that's where she might have gone. She's in the skip bin. What do you think now? John asked her. I reckon she was still partly alive and she's dropped them shoes and the keys out the car window, because that's what I'd do. I'd leave a trail. So let's have a look at the evidence of Gavin Seymour. Seymour had the opportunity to kill Revelle, as his live-in girlfriend Michelle was in Brisbane for the weekend. Seymour said the next day he woke up at around 4 a.m. for a surf. When he was eventually brought in for questioning by police, the detectives noticed bite marks on his fingers and scratch marks on his torso. Seymour said the injuries were from a surfboard while surfing. Later he changed his story to say that some of the injuries were from surfing and some were from gardening. A forensic pathologist assessed Mr. Seymour's injuries and ruled the overall pattern of the injuries, the age, the general characteristics suggest to me that they have arisen possibly during a struggle. The wetsuit was taken for evidence by the police. I want to ask, what was the outcome of this? Were there puncture marks or scratch marks on the wetsuit? Seymour could not account for a missing surfboard cover. Unbelievable. Seymour said he drove Revelle to the Red Tomato Inn at 7 o'clock. He said he bought cigarettes and some alcohol and returned home, watched the TV show Hey Hey It's Saturday and then fell asleep. Police checked the cash register rolls from the Red Tomato Inn and they failed to support Seymour's claimed purchases. Police investigating Revelle's disappearance think it is unlikely that she was ever at the Red Tomato Inn because nobody could recall ever seeing her there. The Red Tomato Inn licensee told investigating officers, "Look at the people we get in here. If a woman like that walked in here, the whole place would have stopped." No CCTV ever corroborated Seymour's evidence. Seymour said he dropped Revelle at the Red Tomato Inn at 7 p.m, but her best friend Kate gave evidence in the coroner's court that they spoke at 7:15 p.m. She told Kate she was going to stay an extra hour and could not speak because she was with Seymour. Seymour's alibi breaks down right here. The bed sheets were cleaned by Seymour before his girlfriend returned from Brisbane. When questioned by police, he said he cleaned them because he slept with an escort and he didn't want his girlfriend to find out. His car was cleaned out over the weekend. His girlfriend Michelle said that his car was cleaned out and vacuumed when she arrived back from Brisbane. She said that he never washed or vacuumed his car in the whole time that she knew him. Police took 9 days to finally search the car. Michelle also noted that one of Mr. Seymour's favourite shirts and 2 framed photographs were missing when she returned from Brisbane. Seymour didn't ever produce the chequebook to police to pay for the extra hour with Revelle. To get the $400 to pay for Revelle, Gavin Seymour hocked his girlfriend's clarinet at cash converters. A neighbour gave evidence that he heard a loud scream around 10:30 p.m, followed by a car spinning its wheels. 9 months later, Seymour rang Select Companions and used a different name to book an escort. The agency recognised the address as Seymour's address and then called police. The police responded to McNair Avenue and found a drunk Seymour sitting on the front fence of the house with his shirt off. He could hardly stand up, and when asked about using the false name, he said, "I knew they wouldn't send an escort if I gave my real name." In 2020, Channel 9's A Current Affair tracked down Gavin Seymour living on the Gold Coast. He's living rent-free in an ocean view apartment owned by his wealthy parents. I'm guessing you'll know what happens next.
Can you tell me what you know about the disappearance of Revelle Balmain?
See, I've got no thoughts, I've got no interest, just piss off.
Can you tell us about the scratch marks on your neck and the bite marks on your hand that police found? Do you have any information that you could shed any light on this mystery? Would you be willing to speak to New South Wales Police?
Seymour never was comfortable in the spotlight and has continued to deny any involvement in Revelle's disappearance.
Detective Sergeant Mulherron had been stationed at Rose Bay Police on November 6th, the day after Revelle's disappearance. This is what he said under oath at the 1999 coroner's inquest. Coroner Abernathy said, "As part of the search of his home, did you search the clothing that he may have been wearing on the day of the 5th of November?" Sergeant Mulherron said, "No, I did not." The coroner said, "Did you ask him what clothing he was wearing on the day?" Detective Mulherron said, "No, I did not. It wouldn't have been there." The coroner said, "In terms of blood on the clothes?" Detective replied, "Yes." Abernathy said, "In hindsight, would it have been a good idea to examine Mr. Seymour's clothing for damage?" The detective replied, "Certainly a priority. In fact, that was a very intense day for us. It was my first day at Rose Bay. I walked straight into this investigation. We were flat out all day, as I say. We've obviously overlooked that. Overlooked the viewing of any clothing for damage." When police came to search the house on November 8th, they did not call in assistance from the crime scene unit. Instead, the detective relied on his eyesight to look for blood and scuff marks on the wall. Coroner Abernathy said, "Why didn't you call in the crime scene unit?" Detective replied, "It was an oversight at the time of the inquiry. In hindsight, I'd do a lot of things differently. That would be one of them, certainly." So let's have a look at the final evidence summary of Seymour Stanovic and Colton. Person of interest, Mark Colton, remember him? He was the wealthy playboy who actually said that Revelle was 6 feet under and no one would ever find her. The only thing that Mark is guilty of is probably being a guy who liked to talk things up and big note himself. Another thing that Mark was guilty of was drug trafficking. He was convicted to 8.5 years jail back in 2017. Let's have a look at suspect number 2, which was Zoran Stanovic. He was the owner of Select Companions. He did lie many times about his whereabouts on the night of Revelle's disappearance. There are lots of discrepancies in Zoran's original statements to the police, which led the coroner to say that Zoran is a suspect in this case. He had conflicting stories. He changed his stories later, finally saying that he was working on the night Revelle disappeared, when he originally said he wasn't working. Zoran had a Serbian translator at the police interview in 1994. He blamed the change in testimony on problems he had with the translator. Later, a Serbian language expert who listened to the tape of the interview would testify about Zoran's original statements. The expert said that the questions put to Zoran in Serbian had been accurately translated by the translator. But why change your story to the police? Maybe he helped Seymour dispose of Revelle's body. This is a long shot. He lied and changed his story many times. I've got about 2 pages here of lies. Maybe I might cover this in another video. I just don't think there is enough evidence against Zoran to make him the main suspect. Here's my murder theory on what I believe happened to Revelle. I believe that she was strangled by Gavin Seymour. And I believe that this happened sometime after 7:15 p.m. We know this because Kate, Revelle's friend, called at 7:15 p.m. It was probably a dispute over money that he was supposed to give Revelle for the extra hour. Remember, he sold his girlfriend's clarinet to pay for Revelle. And remember Seymour's lost checkbook? At 10:30, I believe Gavin Seymour was putting Revelle's body into the back of the car when he realises that she's not dead. A further fight ensues and Revelle is put into the car under duress. This is when the scream was heard by a neighbour at 10:30 p.m. and Seymour takes off in his car. Do you remember Gillian from the Signet Hotel, Seymour's old boss, in Tasmania? I do tend to believe her theory, in that Revelle was abducted by Seymour and Revelle threw some of her belongings out the window when she was driven down the street. I believe that she did this to try and create a trail, let people know that she was abducted. I think it was a pretty smart thing to do. I believe Revelle's body was disposed of in a skip dumpster at his wealthy parents' clothing factory in Sydney. He had access to the premises because he worked there during the week. It was also a weekend, so no one would have been there. As of the 14th of May 2021, Police Minister David Elliott announced that the reward would go from $250,000 to $1 million.
To increase the reward made available for information leading to the arrest of a perpetrator or perpetrators of the murder of Revelle Balmain. This matter is a matter that, of course, has been investigated by the New South Wales Police for over a quarter of a century. Revelle Balmain went missing in November 1994.
As of July 2021, an anonymous tip has led police to release a photograph of a man who may know the last movements of Revelle. Have a look at the photograph. Do you know this person? If so, call Crime Stoppers. Revelle's parents, Ivor and Janet Balmain, fought hard for the police to search for their daughter's killer. Unfortunately, they won't see that come to fruition. Ivor unfortunately passed away in 2010, and Janet passed away just recently in 2020. As can be seen by what I've presented, there's overwhelming circumstantial evidence against Gavin Seymour. There really is only one prime suspect. You can see how many lies and holes there are in Gavin Seymour's story. His evidence has more holes than Swiss cheese. He had the means, the opportunity, and contrary to the findings of the 1999 inquest, he had the motive. Having the best lawyer in Sydney definitely helped him get away with murder. I believe it was lazy police work that hindered this case right from the beginning. In a cold case such as this, people's memories fade with time. Hopefully the $1 million reward is enough to jog people's memories. Thanks for watching True Crime and the Unexplained. I hope they really do catch the killer of Revelle Balmain.